Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Midday Canada Regional Forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I want to begin our video by taking a bigger perspective look on what's going on across much of North America. So we're going to look here at two maps. The map on the left shows you what's called the Vegetation Health Index. Now, most of this index comes from a calculation of something called the NDVI, and that's something a lot of farmers are familiar with. It's called the Normalized Difference Vegetation Index. What we're doing here is we're looking down from space to get an idea about the health of the crop. And the neat thing about this particular site is I can compare 2019 to 2018. And overall, we do see so far through May 13th, things do look on the healthier side through much of the Canadian prairies, even getting over toward, to Quebec and Ontario. And what we're looking for here is more of these colors versus these. So you can kind of look in there and just see things are a little better than they were a year ago. But this doesn't really fully tell the whole story. Pulling up some data here from a program called SMAP, S-M-A-P, we can look at the percent of soil moisture when going back from May 8th to May 10th. And this is what's interesting. We start to see a lot of these colors showing up right in through this corridor, which is quite important because south of there, getting into the U.S., things have been exceptionally wet. Now, what have temperatures done, at least over the last week or so? We've had a cooler pattern in place. In fact, this has really reached into the northern United States. We've had multiple frost events in the Dakotas, parts of even into Minnesota, and even down into in Nebraska. But the cooler pattern that's initiated in Canada has been brought down in the U.S. And we can see that overall the percent of normal precipitation has been on the drier side. Now, there are some exceptions to that. Get over here into parts of Ontario and Quebec, and we start to see some pockets of wetter conditions, and also right up here in and around Calgary, things have been much closer to normal. In fact, even this morning, as you look at this animation, we did have some showers coming up out of the south and east, pushing through Calgary this morning. Much of that, though, is coming out of what's been going on in the central United States, and we have a large low-pressure system. This is just a view of it over the last 36 hours here, plowing through the middle section of the country. And it'll be the moisture that's coming off of that that's getting its way clear up into Canada today. And it's this flow pattern that's really got things in charge. Now, I showed you things are a little bit on the drier side in Canada, but I want to let you know something. Get down south, get into the heart of the Corn Belt, into the major Mississippi River watershed here, and you can see things are exceptionally wet, and we're dealing with an enormous amount of flooding. So it's amazing to see the differences that this border seems to make in terms of both temperatures, precipitation, and of course our flooding picture. Now, what do we need to be paying attention to? Well, it's the Pacific Ocean that's really kind of telegraphing how things are going to be changing. We notice that we're building into a large ridge out here in the western Pacific, just off the west coast in the eastern Pacific in the Gulf of Alaska. But we still have this broad trough that's going to take in a position like this. This is what's letting a lot of this cold air sneak in on the backside, giving us the cooler anomalies, the presence of this trough. We do certainly have some high latitude blocking. There's a big ridge way, way, way north of us that's keeping the jet stream south and active. But I want you to keep an eye on that ridge and what it's going to be doing to British Columbia and what it might do to change the overall flow pattern, or at least reorient it some. Because much of Canada's weather right now is being determined by that ridge and a giant ridge sitting here over the southeast United States. It's what's blocked up the flow and changed things around quite a bit. So let's see the bigger picture first. Over the next 5 days, temperatures are going to be much closer to normal. So you can see here at our 5-day outlook here from the GFS ensemble, where that ridge is building up here. Look at the warmth we're going to be seeing in Alaska and parts of British Columbia. We will see near average to slightly above average temperatures. But getting further to the south where that trough dips down, yeah, we're quite cold into this area compared to average. Now, again, this is always compared to average. You will see with time, this is days 6 through 10, look at what that trough does. So the slightly above average temperatures we might see over the next 5 days will be replaced with much closer to average, possibly even cooler than average temperatures with time as we get into this high over low flow pattern. So that's what we're looking at just out through the next 10 days. Day 11 through 15 tends to wash things out a bit. We can see overall near average to possibly slightly warmer than average conditions. But with the jet stream doing something like this, it's going to be an interesting pattern to see set up. We'll talk more about this long range forecast here in a few minutes. this. Looking at total accumulated precipitation for North America, this is the GFS model and its ensemble members through the next 15 days. I've got the Euro over here on the right. And in general, we see a large section of Canada here, mainly the Canadian prairies, picking up on a drier pattern. Now, there is precip coming in, but a drier pattern overall. Where is it wetter? Well, we got to get over here into parts of Ontario and Quebec before we start to see the wetter pattern emerge. And that's because systems that are coming out of that flow pattern like this come out of the southwest United States and dig through this corn belt, and then they're kind of meandering. They keep going on a path that takes them just like that. Now, that's common, but that's what's keeping eastern Canada much wetter than western Canada over the next 15 days. So let's dig into some of the details here. We're going to go straight to the European model and watch the systems emerging here. This started off early this morning. This was 6 a.m. I'm going to click pause pretty quickly here to show you some of the precip that moved north. There it is. You can see the major system down here. Look at the precip sneaking up here into parts of Alberta and into southern, Manitoba here and Saskatchewan. But as we press through the week, notice it's going to be a relatively cooler and drier week for us. Overall, very windy right there along the U.S.-Canadian border as this system emerges here by Wednesday afternoon. Now, it then goes straight over the Great Lakes and then heads over to Quebec and Ontario over here in eastern Canada. Meanwhile, not much is going on in terms of precipitation across Canadian prairies. Much of the action to the south until we get in toward the end of the week. So Friday into Saturday. And by this time, we've kind of got that high over low pattern going, and that's why we can start to get some precip down here with each one of these lows that emerges in the central U.S. plains and then skirts the Canadian border. So you just don't see any major weather systems coming through to really soak the Canadian prairies as I get you all the way out into the next, we're almost out to day 10 here in the forecast. So if we just kind of watch the precipitation accumulate, again, this started at 6 a.m. in the morning, and that's a central time zone here on Tuesday. And watch what happens as I click play. We just see that overall, we're not picking up a whole lot of precipitation in the coming days. In fact, that took you out to 10 days. And a lot of Canadian prairies are staying relatively dry. It's only as the float gets butting up right here against the mountains that we get some orographic lift out of this. And as each system kind of comes up and goes that direction, the precipitation amounts pick up the farther east you go. But overall, it's a drier pattern for the Canadian prairies after some of the rain. We're getting a little bit of the rain this morning. We're getting like in places like Calgary. Okay, from there, what is the overall pattern doing? Well, let me just show it to you here for all of North America. We're going to pause it right there. Getting out to the end of May, do you see that? See that high over low pattern I was talking about? You're going to see a bigger, broader trough setting up between the Hudson Bay and the Great Lakes as this high over low pattern sets up out west. And that's going to be important for the transition we're going to be seeing into June. See it right there? What that ends up giving us is it ends up giving us this pattern that's almost split. We end up having a lot of our flow going around the trough that's developing in Alaska like this, and then another piece of it dipping down here coming through Southern California. Now, that pattern then kind of comes together over here around the broader trough over the Hudson Bay. So we have to talk about what that may mean here for the Canadian prairies as we move into the month of June. And what it looks like is this. I'm going to take you all the way out here to the middle of June. And the flow pattern, again, is kind of doing this thing where it's kind of confused on the overall flow. Out west, it tends to split, maybe even gets a little bit of high over low. But you can see that the European model, looking at the middle of the month, is trying to keep Canadian prairies relatively dry while it's keeping much of the central plains and through the Corn Belt wet. So very interesting look here overall. But because of that ridge, you see over there on the left-hand side, we can see where the warmer wedge will be, where the cloud cover is going to keep things cool here. So we have a very interesting summer that is setting up here in the longer range forecast. And speaking of longer range, check in again tomorrow because I will be putting out my long range outlook that takes you out 6 weeks where we'll highlight some of these changes. So my.nutrienagsolutions.com, check it out tomorrow. With that, we're going to wrap up this forecast video. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions, thank you for watching our Canadian regional forecast video here. We have multiple updates throughout the week. Check them out, my.nutrienagsolutions.com. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.